Almost every kid said if they had a magic wand and could get rid of it, they would rather be in their parents' generation. One girl told me, half of my friends have eating disorders from TikTok and the other half are lying.
Welcome to Salon Talks. My name is Gabriella Faragine and I'm a staff writer here at Salon. My guest today is Lauren Griefeld, the award-winning documentarian and photographer. You know her from films like Thin, Queen of Versailles, Generation Wealth, and The Kingmaker. Her latest project is a docuseries, Social Studies. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
So, as we've been talking about, Social Studies follows a group of teens around Los Angeles for a year, examining how their generation sort of grew up online. Instagram kind of came about when I was just coming into adolescence, but my 14-year-old sister has pretty much never known life without it. When do you think social media started to really become embedded in teen culture, and where would you say we are now?
Well, I had a similar experience. When I started this project, my two boys were 14 and 20, and they were from two different generations. Like for the 20-year-old, he used social media lightly, talking to his friends, but really he was a reader. My youngest is online all the time. We had constant battles over screen time, and he gets all his news from TikTok. Mm-hmm. So in that kind of spread, I think the way young people use social media completely changed. And part of why I did this series was so people older than that, parents, teachers, siblings, and even kids themselves could see kind of what exactly kids are doing online. We had access to their phones, and so we show that in the series.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as a documentarian and a photographer, some of your past work has sort of allowed adolescents and especially girls to be seen, right? So we have that access. Their lives matter and they're important, and we get that sense in the series. Why did you want to take this particular project on, if that answer differs at all from what you just said?
Yeah, I think in this series, there are no experts. There's no scientists, there's no professors. The kids are the experts. And I felt like it was really important to hear from teenagers, see how they're using it, see it in their lives. So there's a portion that's verite, we're following them in their lives, but they also get to tell us directly what's happening, and they get to kind of break down the presentational side and tell us the honest truth. And really they're truth tellers about how hard it is for this generation. So I thought it was really important to hear from them. It was a really big commitment for them to be in this, and they're also giving up a portion of their privacy, right, sharing their phones. And I think they did it because they did feel like it was important to be heard.
And along those lines, trust must have been a huge component of social studies. How did you convince a group of teens to partake in this series? And then also, what about their parents?
Yeah, and their parents had to, of course, be on board too, because we're filming in their homes. And we also hear from a lot of the parents in the series. I think a lot of the young people felt like it was really important. I think that they felt social media was having an impact on them. A lot of them felt the negative impacts. Some of them also saw the positives, but definitely, almost every kid said if they had a magic wand and could get rid of it, they would rather be in their parents' generation. So I think they felt a sense of purpose in doing that. And then I do slow journalism like this. We had a lot of time. I spent a year with them. We shot 150 days, collected about 2,000 hours of social media. And so there was time to get to know each other, for trust to develop, and for them to really see what my intention was with this series. And also I think they felt aligned with what they saw with past work, like right, girl culture, Fast Forward. They could see that it was also about hearing from them and their voices.
Right. And you sort of alluded to this, but there's that scene during a focus group, Sans Cell Phones, where some of the teens basically share that they would feel better in a way without their cell phones and without social media, but they feel sort of innately tethered to it. That's a very scary sentiment.
Well, one of the things that we did was have these group discussions, and I think the young people really wanted to talk with each other about this thing that they're all going through, but they don't really get to talk about it in this way outside of it. Right. Nobody had phones in the discussion group, and I think it was very freeing for them to just connect. And that's kind of where they end up at the end, is saying we just need to learn how to be people again. And it's so relieving to just talk face to face. Mm-hmm. And for people older than this generation, I think that seems like the most obvious kind of, in a way, like silliest answer, but actually it's so important to have that connection, and they're the ones who say like, it's so healing.
Yeah, absolutely. So your 2006 HBO film Thin examined a group of women struggling with eating disorders. And in social studies, we see that many teen girls are plagued with disordered eating, eating disorders, and those sort of thought patterns as a result of the social media that they consume. What are the parallels and differences with body image that you have seen as media has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I kind of went into this thinking body image and social media is going to be a big thing, but really I had no idea of the scale. When I made Thin, 1 in 7 women had an eating disorder. First of all, we hear from men too about how body image issues affect them. But also, when I started this, one girl told me, half of my friends have eating disorders from TikTok and the other half are lying. So I think what's the difference now is the triggers are ubiquitous and 24/7. So if you have the slightest predisposition towards an eating disorder, the algorithm is going to take you by the hand and show you how to do that very well, how to be inspired, and technically how to do that. And I think, and then for people who don't have a predisposition towards an eating disorder, they're still going to get triggered on the kind of dieting of it all and the comparing yourself to people with perfect bodies, often bodies that are not even real.
Right, there's editing that happens.
Editing, like it used to be when I started this work, it was about the magazines and like maybe retouched photos in the magazines. But now it's like your friends who are retouched, face-tuned, and then also the people that they're looking at, like the Jenners, who are also like very art-directed and manipulated. So it's a really, really tough comparison culture.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I think my parents have been very careful with my sister's social media usage for that exact reason. At one point, one of the teens' moms in the series says that she actually doesn't want to look at her daughter's TikTok. What was your reaction to her saying that, and how does parents' involvement sort of vary?
Well, I think we see in the show that there are a lot of caring, well-meaning parents who are completely clueless about what's going on. And I think that, and I count myself as a parent in that group when I began this. And for me, there were so many things that were revelations that I then could take home and talk to my boys about. And I think that this is going to be a learning curve for parents. I think the show will be educational for parents, and I think it will also be of interest to teenagers who maybe are not shocked like their parents, but who are relieved to see other people going through similar experiences and who will feel seen in the show. When we premiered at Telluride Film Festival, afterwards there was a mother and daughter that came up to me, and the daughter, who was about 20, said, "It was really awkward and kind of uncomfortable watching this with my mom because she knows nothing about my life.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that she does now." So I hope young people watch it with their parents, and we've also made a parent guide and an educational curriculum for schools and parents to start those conversations.
That's fantastic. There are so many insidious consequences of social media that the series covers, from cyberbullying to racism to sexual predators, overdosing, and even the threat of school shootings. Most of these dangers have been around for a long time, but teens of today are facing them in an especially aggressive way. Can you share your thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like I've looked at youth culture for 30 years. My first book was actually about teenagers in LA and how they're influenced by some of these same values: celebrity, materialism, image. I think the thing that's different now is it's like everything on steroids, 24/7. And whereas kids used to maybe compare themselves to the people they knew, the popular clique, the people in their school, now they're comparing themselves to the entire world. And now if you are bullied, the whole bigger community is going to know about it. If somebody, we see in episode 1, Sydney gets slut shamed, and it goes online and the whole school knows about it, but really people beyond the school know about it too. If you have a fight and you lose the fight, it's filmed and people are going to see it. So I think the peer pressure and this feeling of like people watching you and being worried about what your peers think is just under a magnifying glass.
Over the summer, the Surgeon General called on Congress to issue a warning label on social media, similar to the one that we see on cigarette boxes and tobacco products. And that was due to its effects on young people's mental health. Do you think that something like that could actually be effective?
Well, first of all, this day has been very exciting because I just came from meeting with the Surgeon General.
Oh, wow.
We were on a show
so
together,
cool.
And it was amazing to talk to him.
Oh, I can't wait
And
to see that.
I'm in such awe of what he's doing. I think it's so brave, the way he's putting out an advice. He's saying we need to have an advisory on social media apps saying they can be mentally harmful to young people. That's actually what one of our characters, Sydney, says in episode 5. She says, once people knew the connection between lung cancer and smoking, regulation followed. And we can see there's a connection between social media and mental health. I mean, I think one of the unique things about this series is it's all from the kids' voices and from their lives. I think in the scientific community, there's been debate over whether there's correlation or whether there's causality. I think in the show, you see it doesn't matter. They're making the connection. They're saying, I go on social media, I lose 4 hours like that, and I feel sad and depressed. Yeah. Or I'm comparing myself against this person, it makes me feel really bad about myself. Or I'm going down this algorithm and my eating disorder is getting worse. So I hope that people see it and can start talking about what we can do together collectively instead of debating the research. But I think what the Surgeon General is recommending are all amazing, like regulation on the part of government, like all other media is regulated.
Right.
The tech companies changing their algorithm to be in the best interest of kids instead of whatever will keep them on the longest. Mm-hmm. We see how like when there's features like likes, that's so important to kids. They're wired to care about popularity.
I felt better when they gave the option to hide the like count, and I'm older than these kids are, and I remember friends of mine vocalizing a similar sentiment.
And it's so addictive. I think the mistake that we as parents sometimes make is getting upset at our kids for staying on too long. And I had those battles with my son a lot. Now I see it's like an opiate. Like we don't expect drug addicts to self-regulate. I don't think we can expect kids to self-regulate. And I don't even think it's fair to put it on parents. Mm-hmm. I think that we need institutions, the tech companies, government to also step in what's basically a public health crisis.
You completely just prompted my next question, which was if social media is an addiction, which I think the series shows it really can be, what do you think is the panacea? And you just sort of began to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see how relieving and how different it is for young people when they're not on it. Yeah. So I think encouraging those spaces is great. And I think the companies can do a lot to make it less addictive.
And we've spoken a bit about comparison culture already, but it's a huge part of social studies. I mean, and it's a huge part of, I think, relatively everyone's life who's on social media, whether you're a teen or you're not a teen. At one point, Sydney Shear says, social media is more about looking good and appealing to what other people like. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. The Surgeon General was saying that one of the things that alerted him was he was worried that young people were not having as much kind of happiness and joy. And I think that constant like looking over at what other people are doing kind of takes the joy out of life, like, because you're never good enough. And teenagers already are insecure about that. So it's just like endless looking at the entire world, and whether it's your body being thinner, for example, or in the series, a lot of kids talk about how there's a Caucasian body type that's the ideal. And the kids of color feel less than and say things like, I think it would just be easier if I was white. We see it with college pressure, that instead of it being a time where kids are kind of discovering what they want to do in life, where's the right place for them, they're all applying to a very small group of schools and looking at who gets in when they do not. Right. I think that's just made it so hard, is just seeing what everybody else is doing constantly and what other people who may not even be real or realistic and comparing yourself to them.
I couldn't agree more. What was the most shocking or unexpected thing you learned during the time you spent with these kids?
I think the scale of it was really shocking. Like to see, sometimes I would say like, how many people in the group have been sent a nude or been asked to send one. All the hands go up. How many people have struggled with an eating disorder, disordered eating? Huge amount of hands go up. Things like suicidal ideation, which we didn't talk about in the beginning, so I really did not know in our group how many people had struggled with that. There were so many stories about that we couldn't even include them all. So the scale was really shocking. And then a lot of the specifics were really shocking. Like there was this TikTok trend called devious licks, where kids destroy things at school. That was a trend. And we had a conversation about how kids learn about sex, and a lot of them volunteered like when they were exposed to pornography first and learning about sex that way, and the ages were very young. And then they started talking about how kinky sex was in fashion and BDSM was a fashion, and you weren't cool if you just liked vanilla sex. That completely like caught me off guard, and I was completely shocked and tried not to like have my jaw be on the floor when we were in the group, and then went home and asked my boys, like, is this real? That's a question I never would have thought to ask them.
Right.
And they completely validated and said, yeah, that's what we're seeing. So I think that I hope it will be eye-opening to parents, but I think it also might create more empathy with teenagers, that really they're struggling with very difficult circumstances, and it's not just like they're going on their phone because they don't want to listen to you or, don't want to do their homework.
Exactly. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for your time today. This was absolutely amazing. I feel honestly so enlightened by this series, and I know many other people will as well. You can stream Social Studies, available now on FX. Thank you again, Lauren. It was wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching Salon Talks. If you had a good time, why not subscribe right over here so you can get more conversations with your favorite artists, actors, directors, writers, comedians, musicians, politicians, everybody you love, and I love too. And while you're here, why not watch another video right now?